Hey guys, welcome back to another Digital Artcast episode. I'm once again glad to welcome you all to the podcast that has changed my life over the last couple of years. It's been great to have some amazing guests on. The last 2 or 3 months we've had a slew of huge names in the industry come on and talk about their journeys and of course their artistic careers in the entertainment industry. Just a quick kind of housekeeping note with the podcast. Although you guys have probably been experiencing a lot more frequency with the episodes due to the lockdown around the world, myself, I'm looking to spend a bit more time offline and focus on some upcoming work that I'm doing, and some more career aspects, avenues that I want to kind of charge down. So with that, I'm going to try and scale back slightly the amount of episodes that will be getting published. Currently, since 2016, we've probably pushed out an episode every month since then. Maybe one or two, depending on how many people would come on. But within, the space of 6 months, we've managed to do 18 interviews, which is crazy good, but at the same time, not sustainable for the long run if I want to try and keep it consistent. So moving forward, we will have slightly less interviews, mostly 1 to 2 a month, depending on how the month goes. But then again, hopefully you guys will still enjoy coming along and checking out the podcast and listening to myself and my guests speak about the world and, of course, the art that they create. Again, today, I think since the lockdown has occurred, people have had a bit more free time and have not been as busy going out and about. So we've been able to grab a few big names to come in and speak about their art career. This guest today is no exception. Of course, we have the pleasure of introducing someone who I've met at several events, but also who's just been an influence on the concept art world since he's kind of hit the ground running after leaving school and studying. Definitely in the space of a couple of years has made a name for himself. And of course the work that he's been producing. So today, if you guys can help me welcome along today's guest, that is Finnian MacManus. Hey Finn.
Hey, what's up, man? Thanks so much for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Yeah, man, that's great. Thank you again for giving up your time and coming along to talk to us. It's a real honor for us on the podcast. So yeah, thank you. So yeah, where do we really start, I suppose, because it seems like every time I'm kind of chiming into your social media, there's always something epic going on. Either it's work you've produced or an event you're going to, and of course, most recently, you guys or you particularly have founded a concept art house, a concept art studio. So congrats on that. That seems to be a big milestone. Yeah. So for a lot of people who don't know who you are, although I'm sure there aren't many, but if there are any that don't know your career, could you do a quick intro and just let people know who you are?
Yeah, of course. Hey, everybody. My name is Finnian MacManus. I've been a concept artist for around 7 years. I grew up in Chicago, Illinois, and then moved to Los Angeles to attend Art Center Entertainment Design when I was 18. And I was there for 2 years. I ended up dropping out to start working in the industry at Sony as a concept artist, where I worked on God of War. I then worked at ILM, Industrial Light and Magic, in San Francisco for a while, and got to work on a bunch of titles I really enjoyed, like Star Wars. After that, I was really lucky and honored to join the Avatar team, designing with James Cameron and Dylan Cole, a bunch of amazing people over there. And I joined the Film Union, and that was about 3 to 4 years ago. Since then, I've worked on a variety of titles, mostly been freelance. So a bunch of stuff for Fox or Paramount, Disney. I've traveled the world a lot. I took a break for a year. I was still working a bit, but I took a break to travel the world and visited tons of countries like Thailand, Cambodia, lived in London for 8 months, lived in Spain and France. And, those were all very influential events on my life. But, and like Gordon just said, when the coronavirus hit, it was a time for me and some friends, some colleagues I had. We were always thinking of starting up our own studio. We wanted to become independent artists more so than just freelance, but build something of our own and actually be able to contribute something to like an organization that we owned. So that's why I started Terraform Studios, and that was about 3 months ago. But I would say every event in my life, all the freelance projects, the in-house jobs, those all led up to that point. So that's like a very brief, overview of what I've been doing.
Very brief but epic short stint in what you've done over the last couple of years. So yeah, that's like, I think that the resume you have with anybody would have been great. It's particularly, I think, impressive with how young you are, and again, you only had the small stint in school, studying, and then obviously left it to work. What was your kind of method of thinking, especially when you left school to start working? Was it just the drive to just get out and learn on the job? Was that the thing that was kind of driving you to leave school at the time?
Yeah, I would say there's a lot of things. When I first got to Art Center, you have to realize I really sucked. Like I was really bad. And actually, if someone, I have a DeviantArt page that still has some of my old drawings on it. I didn't know perspective. I didn't know shading or form. And when I got into the college, it was actually through my 3D art. So I had relied on 3D programs to make these scenes because I couldn't draw or paint them. And that was the way I actually got in. And when I got there, I was going to school with these people who some of them already had careers. They already had worked as concept artists. Most of them were, 8 years older than I was. And I realized that, man, like I was extremely excited and very nervous, but I also knew I had to get my shit together. Right. So, I just really worked as hard as I possibly could. And I think the big thing that really helped me a lot was that I asked tons of questions. I was never scared to get feedback, and I really wanted to improve. And I recognized that everybody was better than I was. So every new opinion I got, any new tip I got would help me along that journey. So really, I would just be doing, 2 all-nighters a week at Art Center, working really, really hard with like a close group of friends I had there who I still know today. And, we would just basically study all night and draw and paint and do plein air paintings. It was a really great time in my life. It was a struggle for sure. When I moved here, I literally had nothing. Like I was barely scraping by. I lived with 2 other people in a tiny apartment. And I basically survived on like discounted cafeteria food and ramen. And actually, there's a funny story. There's one day where I overdosed on ramen because I was like on an almost double all-nighter, and I had 3 packs of Shin ramen and no water. And I actually blacked out from I think it was like too much sodium. Wow. And thankfully, that was a good thing. I lived with roommates because I blacked out for about 10 minutes, and they were going to call an ambulance. And then I woke up and I was fine. But it was an amazing time and a struggle. Like it was definitely the hardest period of my life because of the amount of work and the kind of sacrifices you make. I had family, but I didn't see them. I had other friends I lost connection with just because I knew that this dream and this goal of mine, it was achievable, but it meant that I had to catch up. So, going back to your question, the reason I decided to leave Art Center, it was a tough decision. At the time, I was very, very grateful that I had met someone who had a big influence on my life, John Park, and he had taken me as like a mentorship student. Right. And that really changed my outlook on everything because I was learning so much more from his, couple hours a week than any of my classes at Art Center. And even though Art Center is a great school, it wasn't the school that was great for what I wanted to do, which was live action film and game concept art. So I got an opportunity to join Sony. I applied and somehow I got in with this portfolio I made with John Park. So, I recognized that, the work they're responding to is the stuff I'm doing on my spare time outside of school. So why am I paying, and racking up debt to go to this school that I'm not learning too much from? So I was like, okay, that's it. I'm going to learn more on the job. Everybody told me I don't need a degree. Even though I never planned to be a dropout, that's just what ended up happening. And, even when I was at Sony, I still took classes on the side because I realized that I was not where I wanted to be, even though I realized that there was still an education I needed to get. So I would take online courses in history. I took Brainstorm courses on my spare time. So I was in 2 classes at Brainstorm while I was working. And it was basically the same thing. Like I was loving life. Like I had an amazing time. but I still didn't have a social life. I didn't see anybody. My only friends were people that I was in school with, basically.
Right.
And we would all just study together after I got home from work. And it really was a great time of learning because I felt that every day I was making a really big stride to improve myself. So that's really what kept me going, was knowing that I was getting closer to my goals. And I think seeing my friends and colleagues also improve, it really made every day exciting. It was like, wow, even if, maybe the stuff I'm doing at work isn't super interesting, but I'm getting better, and one day I'm going to get there.
Yeah, I mean, even just in that whole description of how you were working at school, I mean, that is impressive itself. I mean, because I think the thing we found, especially when people were going to university I was at, it was very, reliant on people thinking that as soon as they got a degree, they would automatically just walk into a job in the industry, which is like, as obviously we know, is as far from the truth as it gets. You really need to be putting in that extra effort. And I know that myself and only I think one other person are the only people who have got work outside of the course. So it's a very interesting thing. I think people in schools all around the world, including, actually I'm surprised it's probably the same thing in art centres, that people rely too much on the school and not enough on their individualism or their work outside of class, right? That's something that you probably learned early on. So
yeah, totally.
So then you worked on God of War, which I never knew. I knew you've worked on all these amazing films, but I never knew your first step was in God of War. Was that the latest release of God of War that was in PS4? Was that
it was the latest one? Yeah, it was the latest one.
Right. Right.
It was a really big learning moment for me because I think every student, when they produce work at school, they're doing these huge keyframes and epic environments and all this stuff. But in reality, when you start as a junior in a studio, you don't get to do the fun, flashy stuff. You're doing call-outs. So I did tons of floor designs. I did rock faces. I did mountains. I got to touch some architecture. I did a lot of natural landscape stuff. But by and large, the stuff that I wanted to do was reserved for the people that were more senior in the studio, which totally makes sense. You wouldn't get a junior to do a very important environment. But that was one of the things I learned, was that even when you go to floor designs, even though I thought I was like, oh, this badass that can do environments and all these cool scenes, in reality, I actually didn't really know that much about design, because when it comes to designing a floor, even though some people might scoff at the idea, there's actually so much theory and thought put into a simple floor tile in a video game, at least on a AAA title, where you actually have to think about the shapes and how it contrasts the rest of the environment. And, do you want this floor to have a tension or not? What's the color palette? What's the texture? All these things are things you have to think about. So that was something I really did learn a lot from as well.
That's awesome. And I take it when you would have been there in that time period, would you have working under Della? Was Della kind of your lead at the time?
Della was there, but Luke was the person that I was working under for the most part.
Oh, of course, Luke's an awesome guy. Really, really, an amazing artist also, just such an epic.
Yeah, he taught me a lot about design.
Yeah, man. So, I mean, that would have been, I think, groundbreaking for any in the industry, but for that to be your first job, that must have been a high almost, because we all know the legacy that Santa Monica leads with even just design, and of course with the game coming out and how well it done. We all know, how hard those guys worked. So where was the point then where you left there to then work within film? Was that another calling card or something else?
That was another, I would say there's all these points in my life where I look back, and it's usually around a year. Like I'll work somewhere for a year and then I'll make a decision to move. And they were all very tough decisions. I've never looked back and thought it was the wrong decision, but it's always been tough because I was having a great time with Sony. I was learning a lot. At the same time, it wasn't the end goal or dream for me, even though I'm sure it would be for a lot of people. But my true passion was always to work in film. And ILM, at that point in my life when I was working at Sony, I never even thought that was possible. For me to work at ILM, it was such an unattainable goal. I thought that would be something that I had planned to do 5 years from then. But they had reached out about a junior concept artist position, and I really just couldn't pass it up. I knew that I had some friends that worked there, and I knew that they didn't really offer positions too often. Usually when they post a position on a website, tons of people will apply to it, but they actually, the person in charge of their studio reached out to me and asked me if I would be interested in a junior position. So even though I was taking a downgrade, I went from a concept artist, a normal concept artist, to a junior again. I had just gotten promoted to a concept artist, and then I was getting demoted. It was still very much worth it for me. And it was a crazy experience, like switching cities in like basically a week and a half. And then getting an apartment set up and just starting like instantly my first day on the job at ILM, I was already on several film projects and meeting with directors and producers. So it was a big change, but definitely one that I appreciated because it gave me this huge new challenge that I had to overcome. And that's something that I always encourage people to do, is to give yourself those challenges in life, because that's where you learn the most and develop the most as a person.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel like that's a case that I think even I've been guilty of the last couple of years, is that, you know, taking gigs that I know I'm quite capable of finishing on time to a standard. But then, of course, when I see the stuff that's like a little outside of my range, I'm always like, oh, I'm not quite sure. But I remember watching a documentary with David Bowie when he talked about, you know, with a lot of artists, he feels that like you should always be wading water. You know, your feet shouldn't be quite touching the ground when you're working. That's probably when you do your best stuff. So I think that's a very good thing to instill in students, and of course to the listeners, is that, you know, you always have to make sure that you're pushing the boundaries of what you think you can do, because I think a lot of times you probably find you surprise yourself, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it was the same for the studio recently. There's so much more I have to learn as a business owner, and especially on the legal side of things, that I just had no clue about. So I think I knew in my head, you know, hey, I've been through all this other stuff, I could handle it. But at the same time, there's always a part of me that has some fear when starting a completely new venture, whether it's like joining a new project that I feel is going to ask even more my time or responsibility, and like how are people going to judge the work I do? You know, am I going to do a good job? There's always a fear and doubt. But I think that the risk for that you're facing for that fear, and the reward of actually succeeding is so great. You know, if you think about the type of person you'll become and what you'll be able to do as a result of succeeding, that's always been what pushes me to try to take more and to do more. And whenever I'm in that spot where I'm faced with, you know, a little bit of fear and a little bit of uncertainty, but all this potential, that's where I personally excel a lot, because then I feel the stress, just a little bit of stress, that pushes you to overcome it. And I find in those moments when you're a little bit stressed out and you have like a deadline and you need to learn something, that's when you make the most creative decisions. It pushes you to find new ways, like almost like creating new pathways in your brain, where you're like, okay, if I can't get this done the normal way I would handle things, I have to learn something new on the spot. And, you know, I try to put myself in positions like that more often now. I like actively look for positions of uncertainty and, you know, uncomfortableness, so that I can benefit from learning how to succeed in those positions.
I think it's interesting as well, the way you talk about the opportunities that have been presented to you with different studios. I mean, did you feel, I mean, was the idea that you have now, the Terraform studio, was that something that was always in the back of your mind when you were going from job to job early on?
No, actually. If someone were to ask me 2 years ago if I wanted to start a studio, I would have said absolutely not. I would have said, I don't like to manage people. I don't like business. You know, I'm not a business person. I don't want to deal with contracts. I don't feel like I have experience to art direct. Like, those are all things that I would say. But I think something really switched the last year when, you know, there are a few people that really inspired me. One of them is Max Berman, who's a friend of mine. And, you know, everybody knows him. He's very famous in the industry now for Kitbash 3D and his game that he released. And I realized that for a lot of the ideas I had to come true, approaching it from a business perspective where I actually own a company and can then create an IP through that company, that's something that's way more attainable than approaching investors as an individual. So that's where it started. And I think originally I thought that I wouldn't enjoy business, wouldn't enjoy managing or art directing. But it turns out that little by little over the past couple of years, I've been able to delve into it on the side without having to start the studio. And I realized I actually really love it almost as much, or maybe even as much as doing art. I love to create business strategies. I love to think about, you know, passive sources of revenue. I love to be the creative director on a project where I manage more than just the art, but also like the logo or the marketing of something. And it's something that I didn't know that I would enjoy. I would have bet that I wouldn't enjoy it, you know, a few years ago. But I think it's just because I didn't experience it for myself. And that's another thing where like I'd recommend people to at least try other avenues out before you discourage them or you decide not to do them. Because I think right now I'm the happiest I've been in my life because of the decision to start the studio. And if I hadn't done that, I don't know what other opportunity I would have had to start it. I think it was very unique. We had the coronavirus. We're all stuck at home. There's work coming in that I can do individually, or I could staff up and approach it from a much larger overview. And
Hmm.
I think if the virus hadn't happened, if I wasn't stuck at home, it probably never would have happened. I probably never would have started the studio. I would have been
Oh,
at events, doing workshops, traveling, working on set somewhere on a film, and
right.
I would have pushed it off to the side. But I'm very grateful that I had the opportunity to start it and to grow more because of that.
Right. Okay. Well, I mean, I think even for established artists, it's always a big risk taking on such a huge project as running and managing your own studio. Especially, I think, recently with a couple of friends I knew who were up at, the places in Canada, film cell that had closed down, and a lot of the places up there that have kind of seen downturns and they've had to shut. So, um, what do you think moving forward is something that you think would separate or define your studio at the moment? Do you feel that, would keep you not only sustainable, but would differentiate you from the other VFX houses?
Yeah, so I think the main thing is that over my career, I've tried to brand myself even before the studio. I remember going back to art school, people would always tell me, not all the work is fun work in concept art. And for me, the fun work was doing things like blue sky exploration, finding new ideas, design,
Hmm.
designing unique ideas. They could be spending an hour on each painting rather than days. And that's something to me that's always been the most fun. Like I've always felt the most free and the most joy by doing those, idea explorations and finding the architectural styles or the landscape style, the color palette for a game or film. And I've tried to brand myself as the person that does that well, and in the end, that's the type of jobs I always get these days because I've consistently put out that sort of work on my portfolio. And that's what I wanted for the studio, really, is I want the studio to be a place that people turn to get unique ideas and for blue
Hmm.
sky for pre-production work. And thankfully, it's worked out great. We're fully staffed on pre-production projects for actually the rest of this year and some of next. So right now, it definitely seems sustainable. There's a lot of people that want to work with us that we're not able to work with right now just because of my time burdens. I can't physically hire more people without
Hmm.
restructuring things. But
Right.
yeah, in the end, the way we want to brand ourselves is to be the people that provide unique ideas, unique creative decisions that so
Hmm.
that a project can have its own vision and we can contribute to that vision. We also will have an e-commerce side to our studio that's launching very soon. So
Hmm.
I have a lot of artists doing their own kit bash packs. We have tutorials that are being released. I don't think I've ever released publicly a tutorial. A lot of people
Hmm.
have asked me to. But I've kind of been waiting for a moment like this where I can actually do a tutorial and have it contribute to something larger than just that individual Gumroad. I'd rather make a program that people can follow with different steps on, how to learn different creative abilities. I'm not someone who really focuses on the technical side of programs, how to do this
Hmm.
or how to do that. For
Yeah.
me, the most important thing in my life is design and the ability to create something that's totally out of the world and
Hmm.
believable at the same time, that's immersive. So I would say that's our branding. That's what we're trying to be and present ourselves as.
Right. Okay. I mean, well, it definitely sounds unique from your point of view. I think it's one of the few things that we've seen in art houses, especially with concept art houses, is that people will, like you said, almost the same as way they'll come to an individual artist. They'll go to specific studios because they know their voice, their vision is something that they want to share. And even back, in the days when I was at Axis, it was the same thing. People would go to that studio because they knew the work they were producing, they knew the level or caliber they were churning out on a weekly or monthly basis. So that was something they were like, well, we want to go to those guys. So at the moment, then, how big is the studio? What's your kind of infrastructure at the moment?
Yeah, totally. We have 8 full-time employees. So
Hmm.
most of them are artists. Most of them
Hmm.
are senior artists, actually. One of the things
Right.
about the studio that I want to be very sure of is that I only wanted to hire people that I really trust.
Hmm.
I've worked with everybody in my studio before in
Hmm.
some capacity, so I know how they work. I know that they're efficient, that they're
Hmm.
very unique creatively. And I know that they can all bring something different to the table. And really what I wanted to set up with my studio wasn't just a situation where, oh, I'm the creative director and I make all the decisions. Even though, that's good that I have this vision for the studio, I wanted to be surrounded by people who inspire me. So I wanted to recreate this feeling that I got on the past productions where you join a new studio and you see all these legends, these people that you love, and like, wow, you can learn from them. You can ask them feedback and questions. I wanted to create an atmosphere where everybody can learn from each other. And,
Right.
all the people I've hired are people that I love, their sensibility, their design style, and they all do things that I can't do. So, that was one of my big decisions in hiring them, is that like, I'm going to learn from these people too. I may have the vision for the project and the idea of where things go, but I feel like each of the people I hire, they're not just artists that you can plug into any project just to replace someone. They're people that will bring their own really powerful creative vision to anything they touch. Like you see a piece by Mark Holobabe or Pablo Dominguez or Luis Carrasco, any of these guys, it's their style, and that they have all these years of experience, of unique life experiences that boil down to their specific vision. And that's something I wanted to capture. So most of the artists are like that. They're these people that have worked in film and games for a long time. They've worked on all sorts of productions. They're very, very efficient with their workflow. And other than that, I have one person who's a marketing specialist who's a friend of mine. And what he's doing right now and what he'll be doing is he's going to be helping us with the e-commerce side and the social media. So he's very skilled at business analytics, at branding, at finding out what people in a niche want from the companies that they follow. So he's very specific to that. And I think that's something that a lot of the companies in our field don't really utilize, is that, a lot of us come at social media and business from a concept art perspective. But for me, it's really useful to have someone on the team that I can always go to that has been in business his whole life. So I can always ask, our guy JC is his name, JC Luo. He brings a very unique perspective, as he's worked in the business and entertainment field for 10 years for a multitude of companies, managing their social medias, their business strategy. And that's another aspect that I'm really keen to learn more of. And that's why it's great to have him on the team. So that kind of encompasses all of our artists right now. There's actually a lot of people I want to hire that I have plans to hire in the future. They range from art directors to actual concept artists. And some of those are already planned, but they won't take place until the new year, just so that we can have everything up and running smoothly.
Right, makes sense. So, I mean, for the limited time I've run my own business as a design studio, also back when I was doing, graphic design, I found that the worst thing about that was the more I was taking on the business side of the company and producing work, and then also trying to get work in the door, the less art I was making. Is that something that you've actively thought about ahead of time, or something that you're noticing now as you're running the business?
I thought about it.
Yeah,
I've absolutely thought about it. And that's, honestly, that was my biggest fear, was that a couple of years ago, if you would have asked me, hey, like if you were to start a business, why or why not? It would be because I didn't want to be a manager. I didn't want to be on the business side. Right now I'm doing concepts for 3 projects. So I'm still very, very active. And I assist with every studio project we have. I'm always doing sketches and paintings for them too. How I manage the time is I could be working while I'm giving feedback to people, while I'm talking to people. I'm still, I would say some people would consider me a workaholic. I really love my job. So I'm happy to spend, 10 hours a day painting, like perfectly happy to every day. But I definitely still make time for myself. I work out, I see friends, I go on hikes. So there's still definitely time in the day that I spend on that. But I would say that how my time has changed is that I'm very, very meticulous about planning now. I plan everything out within 10 to 15 minutes of each other. So specific time I'm going to work on projects, different meetings, calls I have, whether it be on the legal side, business side, or the creative side. All this stuff is very, very carefully planned out, usually a couple of weeks ahead of time. So that I know exactly where I'm going to be at every moment, and there's never any panic. And I think that's kind of like something about me that I've always had since I was a kid. Is I'm a very, very I'm a very plan-oriented person. I plan not only my future goals, but things that I want to get done in the day, in the week. Literally everything in my life, I like to have a plan for it. Now, I don't go crazy if it doesn't happen. And honestly, most of my long-term plans never resolve in the way I think they're going to. And that does not discourage me or, get me down or freak me out. I always have a mind towards that, planning is something that is essential, but your plan may not come true. But having the option and the thought to plan ahead and to have all these different outcomes in your mind first, it'll make it so much easier to adjust when something changes. So that's something I'm very careful about. Now, again, like back to your question in terms of managing, I know I just went on a tangent, but
Yeah.
I spend almost the exact same amount of time doing concept now still that I would have done if I was a freelancer. I'm much more specific about my time.
Right. Okay. I mean, it seems like a crazy amount of stuff to be doing all at once. I mean, of course, you're thriving under this pressure. I think a lot of people might find it surely overwhelming for anybody. But do you think that your time in the studios previously is something that prepared you for this?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've dealt with a lot of stress in my life. And like you said, I think it's something that I do well under. I mean, I think stress, in a sense, for me, I am not a stressed out person, but I think situations that would normally cause people stress, because I've been through them so often, they don't really shake me, or I don't even really feel anything from them anymore. A stressful moment for me, and this hasn't happened, but like if a stressful moment is like if one of my artists like tells me on the day that he has to stop working for me, like instantly, like, and I have to make up for like weeks of work, that would stress me out. But anything up to that point, I've dealt with a lot of things in my life, and nothing has ever impacted me in a super bad way. I've always been able to recover. I would say some of the moments that were the most stressful for me, I think working at ILM, my first 3 to 6 months, just getting up to speed with everybody. That was crazy because switching from a perspective of a games-oriented workflow perspective and deadlines and switching to film, I would be going from like having 5 floor designs due in a day, which is nothing. It's very simple work, to having to do like 2 full keyframes with robot characters and creatures fighting it out in a fully designed city in one day. And for 2 different projects, so splitting your brain and managing 2 different things. And at the same time, my skills weren't up to par with anybody else in the studio. So that was a stressful situation. I think it's moments like those, and all the stuff from Art Center, and dealing with those different individual stressful periods that have prepared me for this, where it doesn't really faze me anymore. And it's even exciting. It's like if there's a challenge, I get more pumped. Like I'm like, wow, I really want to work late because I'm really excited about dealing with this. So I kind of have a way of turning the stress into excitement, which I think it can be very useful. I think that managing your emotions in a way that can benefit you is really helpful. Like not just being okay with jealousy or greed or stress or anger or anything, but being able to turn any of those emotions and use them as a catalyst for something else in your life, I think is very valuable and has helped me a lot.
Yeah, I mean, definitely it sounds like you have your shit together more than most people. So, yeah, I mean, like, it's interesting as well that, you're talking about launching these projects, and obviously, of course, the studio has just, erupted into, and fruition it's came to be. I mean, in essence, I think the hardest thing about running a studio also is like also bidding for work or clients approaching you. But then, of course, you have almost the reverse effect now, where you're turning away work at this point because there's so many people wanting to work with you, right? So, how are you going about picking those projects specifically? Maybe not talking specifically about what you're working on, but what client-wise are you kind of thinking is the best fit for your team?
Yeah. So whenever we have new clients in the studio, the first thing I ask always is, are they reputable? And almost always it's yes. Almost always it's a big company who is well known. The second thing is, are my artists going to love this? Like, are they going to physically get out of bed in the morning and be excited to work on this project? If that's a yes, then they pass that phase, which is most of them still are very fun projects. I do think that the most important thing for the studio and for the artist is that we continue to do a job that we really love, that is really something that we look forward to. I never want to be a boss that is like forcing my artists to do something they don't want to do. I want to make sure that I put my artists on the individual tasks that they enjoy, that they're happy with, that they feel like they're challenged, but also they want to overcome it, that they would learn something from the process. So those are all things I ask. I think I would turn away work if it feels too easy, if it feels like, I'm copying something else. That's something I would always turn away. I would turn away work if someone approached me and was like, hey, make a copy of League of Legends or World of Warcraft or something, I definitely wouldn't accept that. Because I want to use every opportunity as an artist for growth of whatever I can get, whether it's growth in speed and efficiency, growth in creative mindset, growth on the business side. I try to, and I encourage my artists to do the same. And thankfully, they're all of the same mind with me. They're all people that are hungry for knowledge, even after they've made it. Like these guys, they've made it in their careers. They don't have to work for me to get work. They could, go anywhere and do great. They do workshops. They're well known. But what we all have in common is that we're all people that really want to be the best at what we do. We want to, we love our jobs. And I just want to make sure as a business owner that I'm providing work that will keep everybody excited on a daily basis.
Right. Yeah. I mean, again, this is a thing that, the challenges you'll face as a boss now, as opposed to just, I say just an artist, but, someone working by themselves as opposed to having to corral artists into another place where they're working together. Cohesion again in a studio is different because when you join a team, obviously you're trying to meld minds together and work, as a one unit, as a collective, which obviously for a lot of new studios is like the biggest hurdle, right? Is something that is early on very hard to try and get perfectly because you've got multiple people who you probably have worked with in the past and they're working one-to-one with you, but then you might also find that a lot of these guys maybe haven't worked with each other. So I guess the question is, moving forward into now what you've established as the company, and you talk about there's not a lot of things that phase you, but what do you think is your next big challenge for the studio internally? What do you think is the one thing that you're going to have to spend maybe the most time working through?
Yeah, that's a good question. Honestly, it's funny. Most of the artists in my studio actually already know each other too. And I got very lucky with that, Yeah. There's a few that are in LA and we've all been a group of close friends for 3 to 4 years. And there's other people internationally that are also familiar with each other, that have talked to each other before. So in terms of working together, that hasn't been any problem at all so far. The thing that is a challenge for me coming up is, I guess it's twofold. The first thing that's on my mind is expanding the studio. We have all the means to expand. It's more about how I manage my time with that expansion. So right now I wouldn't say I'm at a limit, but I'm very comfortable. Like I'm not stressed out. I'm working on projects with these artists I love. And I want to make sure that I don't interrupt that. I don't want to be this crazy lunatic running around, missing deadlines, etc. I'm never going to accept too much work. So I guess the biggest challenge for me is to be able to expand while keeping our creative vision intact and keeping the community feeling that we have. I want all the artists to feel very comfortable with each other, like they could hit each other up and talk about, design or talk about their life, and just personal life and hang out together. So I want to keep that feeling as we get larger. And, something I despise after working in a lot of corporate companies is the feeling of this, corporate overlord watching you. And I've worked in companies before where it's like, just the atmosphere of it is stifling. Like you don't want to talk to your peers because you feel like you could say something bad that's against company policy, or it's just not a creative atmosphere. So that's the opposite of what I want to do. So the big challenge for me, I think, going forward is, after this year is complete and we've happy with what everything has been done, before we hire anybody else, I'm definitely going to be getting everybody's opinions on how they think they would like to expand too. It's more of a mindset of, everybody is in this together as a studio, and we're kind of in control of our own futures now. And I just don't want to mess it up as we go forward. The other big challenge for me is, as someone who is new to business, but is still loving it, is on the e-commerce side, how can we better help the concept art community with developing products? I already have a huge list of tutorials that I have planned. I've already recorded a couple that I'm going to be releasing later. And, we have actually 4 kit batch packs that are already completed.
Right.
But it's, I think it's more in seeing the response to those and seeing what people want us to produce next and what is missing from the already huge, library of online content for the concept art world. And, I'm happy to take suggestions. If people are listening to this and you want something specific from our studio, please let me know. Because, most of the artists in my studio are happy to produce content. And we're going to be producing it on a pretty large scale soon. So I think that's the biggest challenge for me too, is finding on the e-commerce side ways to help and give back to the community and making products that people really appreciate.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like, it definitely sounds like you have, a plan in place. Of course, you would have to run a business. You have to, look at 6 months, like a year into the future and think about where you're going to land. But then, of course, I think taking it back to your days of concept art, I mean, you've come so far in such a short space of time. But I think for most people's careers in Hollywood and, of course, the entertainment industry, less than 10 years to be where you are, I think is rare, for people to be in that position. You talk about guys like Max Berman, like that's not the norm, that's the exception. That's, that's the rarity of people having those opportunities when they're so young. So I guess looking back over the last couple of years when you've worked in these different studios, if you were kind of, day one back in Art Center, and you met your younger self, what would be the one thing or the one piece of advice you would probably give to yourself to advance your career or maybe avoid some of the pitfalls you fell into during your time?
I feel weird for saying this. I really haven't had many pitfalls. There is one instance that I can't talk about that had to do with a studio I worked for. But it wasn't entirely my fault, and it was my only advice would be to do things to avoid that incident. I just say to everybody out there that's listening, don't host your private work for studios. Don't host it online, even if it's behind a paid portal, even if it's in a Google Drive secure folder, because people can get to it. So that's all I'll say about that. That's something that's my deepest regret I've had as an artist looking back, is that an event that I was involved in, work got released and it ruined a lot of things for me, like relationships with people I really valued. And it made my life hell for a few months. Thankfully, I was able to recover as a professional. But at that time that it happened, I had no hope. I thought my career was over. So that's really the only thing, though. I mean, looking back, like I told you actually before we talked, before we started the podcast, I've been really, really blessed. I've been very, very lucky in life, and I fully acknowledge that, by having the opportunities I've had. Growing up with parents that, even though if they're divorced and we had troubles as I was growing up, they both supported my career in art. They said that if I could make a living out of this, I could prove to them I could make a living, that it'd be okay with them. I've had mentors like John Park. Luke Berliner was an awesome mentor to me. Yannick Dussault from ILM, Dylan Cole from Avatar. It's like every job I've been to, there have been these extremely kind individuals who are just gods at what they do. They're the best. And they were all happy to give me their time to take a look at my work and tell me not just advice on art, but life advice, financial advice, investment advice, personal relationship advice. I mean, all these things that, me being separated from my family, living in California, not being able to talk to my family so much, it's been very, very appreciative. It's been very appreciated. And because of that, I really wouldn't change much. Like if I go back, and I feel like each of the struggles I've endured has made me a much better person because of the struggle. And I feel like if I were to take myself out of those tough situations, I'm not sure how I would have ended up as a person. I'm sure I would be a nice guy, but I don't know if I would be resilient or determined or passionate still. And that's why I really wouldn't change much looking back. Like I said, I've been very lucky, and I've had a lot of hard times. But I'm a firm believer that, hard times make, hard, good people that understand their shortcomings, and they have humility, and they can understand when they're in the wrong. And all the negative experiences I've had have helped me to understand other people's point of view, to put myself in the shoes of other people, and to really look at things from an open-minded perspective, which I'm very, very grateful for. So I guess that's a long-winded answer, but I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's you're always fairly lucky. I think if you exist in an industry and there's very few instances of things you've done possibly wrong, but things you've maybe not seen foresight into, long down the line, what's going to happen if you maybe, like you said, you maybe host something online or you're not really thinking. But then again, it's just a thing that happens, I think, in life, is that you say to yourself, these hard times make hard people. So everything you've done has shaped you to who you are and where you are just now, and you probably wouldn't change much. But I think it's always just interesting to look at the formula, or trying to break down the equation that makes people as successful as you are. And I think it's always interesting when people come on the podcast, they always want to listen and find that, the goal, the thing that will make them just like you. But of course, everybody has their own path. And I think the thing I've always talked about in this podcast that's great is that you could ask somebody how they got in an industry or how they got to where they are, and everybody has a different answer, right? Nobody's had the exact same path. And whether it's starting your own company or working for ILM or working or going to school or not going to school, everybody has their own route. So I guess in the future, moving forward, what do you think is your kind of long-term goals? Is it more career focused with the studio, or is there also things personally you want to achieve in the next couple of years?
Man, there's so many different goals I have. It's hard to structure them sometimes.
Yeah.
I think the really long-term, I don't know when this is going to happen, years in the future goal is to launch our own IP, whether it's a game or a film, like a short film or something like that, through the studio. And I can guarantee that will happen someday, because it's one of the main reasons I started the studio. And I can also say that I want to build the studio as a platform for not just myself, but also the other artists inside to launch their own projects as well. So there's a lot of, one of the main ways one of the things people need to launch that is money, it's just like capital. And I think that the e-commerce side and, all these other things we're trying to plan, that will give us the opportunity to use some of those funds for our own projects. So that's one big goal. Another big goal is that I want to travel more. This year I had a lot of travel plans, either to do workshops. I was supposed to spend a month in Japan, which I was really looking forward to, and I wasn't able to do that. So I really would love to travel more. Another thing that I always say when I give a workshop is that really travel is the biggest inspiration for me, and it's true. It's the experiences I've had when I've been traveling, throughout any country, have really shaped my art and my design sensibility for tons of reasons, for political reasons, for, seeing architecture, for seeing street food and talking with these people and trying to communicate with other beings, even if we don't speak the same language. All the experiences I've had while traveling have really, really changed my outlook both on life and on my art. And, I definitely want to keep that up as I go forward. Starting the studio, I tried to make it in a way so that I would be able to travel while working for the studio. And that's definitely something that I'm going to be doing in the future. So goals beyond that, there are actually a few other business opportunities, business ventures I have in mind for the future that probably won't launch for another 3 to 5 years. I don't want to say them now because I don't really want to give away my idea.
Of course.
But you can definitely look forward to seeing other ventures being started after, after Terraform Studio has kind of made a name for itself and is pretty set in concrete. There's definitely other things I want to jump into. I'm personally, for my personal goals, there's a lot of other things I'm interested in besides concept art that I want to tackle or learn more about. When I was a kid and even in the art center, before I was as focused as I was now, I did a lot of fine art, sculpture, painting that had nothing to do with concept art. And I would really love one day to delve back into that. I love writing as well. I used to write short stories. That helps me a little bit with creating the lore for universes that I design. I'd love to get back into writing and write a book someday. I play the piano, really, I've been playing the piano for 12 years, blues and jazz. I want to spend more time in that. I also really want to learn how to play the Indian sitar. That's a musical instrument. I really love the sound of it. So, there's a bunch of other interests I have that I want to focus on. And it's all I know that in my head, it's all going to come to be one day. I'm going to have time to do this one day, maybe just not right now.
Right.
And, creating the studio, creating the different business ventures, those are going to give me one day the peace of mind to be able to take that time off to explore all those other things. And I'm sure that it'll happen. Maybe it's going to be 7 to 10 years from now, but I want to set myself up right now to have a future where I can do anything I want.
Yeah. I was going to actually just jokingly say it was one of your interests, also fashion.
Oh, it is. Yes, it is. I
was going to be one of the most fashionable concept artists I think I've ever seen in my life.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm super into fashion. I'm surprised I actually didn't mention that. I even wanted to create my own clothing, like sew things together, but after looking into it, there's so many things I have to learn. I'm going to need to save that for a few years from now. But I'm very, very into fashion too. That's something that's also inspired a lot of my work.
Yeah, it was definitely interesting to look at your feed some days and see you walking down with like the massive jackets down Park Avenue in New York. And I was like, what's going on here? This is like something you don't usually see with concept artists.
I'm not very personal with my Instagram. I very rarely post pictures of myself, and I'm pretty I wouldn't say embarrassed. I'm more nervous about like pictures of myself and like how people will judge me. But I'm super into fashion. I mean, I follow a lot of different fashion designers, and anybody who sees me in real life, I'm always trying to wear something that looks interesting because I'm really obsessed with the idea of, what you choose to wear is a piece of art in itself, and it reflects who you are and messages you're trying to send and things that you enjoy. And I feel like it does say a lot about you as a person and individual. And that's why I'm so interested in it, is that, when your first look at someone, your first take on them is going to be firstly, obviously their appearance. So before you even talk to them, what are the subconscious signals they're sending? What's the message they're sending? And what thought have they put into that signal that they're sending you? And that's something that subconsciously I'm very interested in. So that's one of the reasons I like fashion so much, but also just from the amazing materials and inspirations behind a lot of modern fashion these days is very interesting.
Interesting. Okay. So, I mean, generally, I think we try to end on a note that will inspire the students, but I'm just wanting to maybe touch on something that we haven't dived into too deeply, but I know you have a lot of experience in, is that where do you feel like, I mean, you've probably talked about it, but maybe going into more depth of travel, right? So you obviously took a stint where you kind of went around the world and engrossed in on other cultures and other things that were going around the world. How do you think, or how would you like the students to acknowledge how this makes artists grow exponentially?
Yeah, so before I talk about it, this will segue into it, is I want to talk about what I was leaving in order to do that. Because I think it'll kind of cement into people how important it is to me. So at the time I decided to leave the US for a year, I was at the peak of my career as a concept artist. I was working on a project that people would dream to work on that, I had personally loved and had inspired me when I was a kid. I was designing for Avatar 2 and 3, and my contract was not done. I could have stayed there and wrapped the films. But I decided to leave in the middle of the production after a little bit over a year, and it was a really hard decision. But I'm very grateful I did it because of the amount of stuff I learned that year while traveling. The people I met, the connections I made. I mean, some of my best friends, some of the people I call my best friends now are people that I met that year traveling. I would basically, my home base was in London, and every 2 weeks I would travel to a new country for like around a month. And then I'd come back to London, do 2 weeks of personal or freelance work, and then go out again. And every country I'd go to, I'd contact a couple artists in that country and say, hey, I'm coming. Any chance we can meet? I'd love to meet you and say hi, and maybe you could show me some cool food. And that's how it went. It was just perfect. I met a really good friend of mine, Andrea Ciampo, the first way by doing that. When I was in Spain, I met a bunch of other amazing concept artists. I didn't end up meeting anybody in Thailand or Cambodia, but that was because I was already on a trip with 2 other friends of mine. And, I think the main thing that's the most important thing you learn when you travel is to have an open mind. And I say most important because a lot of times people consider on these podcasts, they look for podcast information on how to be a better concept artist. But having an open mind is something that will impact your life forever. And you might not realize it, but it will actually have such a great impact on who you develop to be as a person. And I think it was, for me, seeing people in abject poverty still being happy, and seeing people struggle with things, and going through struggles myself in desperate situations, backpacking. It was being welcomed into a total stranger's house in an alleyway in the middle of a village in India to come share tea with them. Even though I didn't know them at all, we didn't speak the same language, but they just wanted to say hi and share some tea with me, and show me like some little arts and crafts that they made. And it's moments like that that I think are pretty incredible. And you end up learning a lot about, just human beings and how we relate to each other, and views that we share, and why people share certain views, why people vote a certain way, or why people choose to live a certain way. And I think these are all things that can make you understand other people's perspectives as a person. Now, when that factors into your design, there's a lot of different ways. You want to be someone that is approachable, that is a nice, kind person that you feel like you can talk to. A lot of companies won't hire you if you come off as like an arrogant prick, basically. And, I think having an open mind really, really helps with that. But, also from traveling, it's helped my design sensibility a ton, seeing and all these different experiences that you see, different types of food, different types of animals, and geography, and natural landscapes. They're all memories that get imprinted into your brain that you're going to draw upon when you're doing your next painting or reference gathering. You're going to remember that moment that you saw this incredible, temple in one of these countries, and be like, wait, I can use that as an inspiration for this. And those moments happen to me all the time. When I'm on a new project, there's all these memories I have of things I can dig up and say, oh, I went to this place. Most people don't even know about it, but I'm sure I can find some photos and use that as inspiration. And those are all ways that's really helped me in my life. I would say the thing I'm most grateful for about that year were the people I met, by far, because at the end of the day, I'm a person that really thrives when I can rely on other individuals for support, when I can talk to people. I'm very social, and just getting to know some of the people I met on that trip, and knowing that, I'll always be there for them, and they'll always be there for me, and that it might be a year, 2 years before we meet up the next time, but we're still going to carry on like nothing happened. It's things like that I really appreciate in life. And I guess that was most of the things I take away from traveling, is every time you go out, you are guaranteed to see something new. You're guaranteed to make new experiences and new memories. And I know for a lot of people, it's unaffordable, but there's actually very, very cheap ways you can do it. I crashed on a lot of couches. I crashed on with my friends a lot of the time. I backpacked a lot. So you can do a lot of really cheap ways for doing it, but it's definitely something I recommend to everybody.
Well, yeah, I definitely think that's a great note to end on. I mean, I definitely think that it is something I feel has been underutilized. I mean, I know I've experienced traveling as well, and even the last couple of years going to events around the world and speaking to people has definitely informed not me just as an artist, but as a person. Like you said, it grows you exponentially from within. So I think it is a great message that people can have who listen to the podcast, that travel and just personal growth is something you also have to focus on, apart from artistic growth or growth within your career. You also have to just you as a person grow as well. So
I do, really quick before we end there, I do want to
on you go. Yeah.
I think most people, when they think about being a concept artist, they want to learn concept art things. They want to learn how to design sci-fi or fantasy. What they miss out on 100% of the time is that it's actually being well-rounded as a person will make you a great concept artist. Knowing about history, about science, about math, about politics, about culture, about music, all these things factor into your designs and your unique sensibility. There's imagine two people. One of them stays at home and goes on ArtStation the whole day, and all their memories, everything they absorb, are other people's concept art. They might know all the names in the industry, but all their memories are other people's interpretations. And then there's another person who tries to have a new experience every day. They go to a new place, they meet a new person, they try a new food, they learn something about science or history every day. that second person is going to have so much more uniqueness to contribute to the world, because their designs will be made up of all the memories and experiences that they have that are completely unique. So that's just one thing I wanted to say, is that you don't want to just, as a concept artist, pursue concept art and technical skill to your best ability. You want to become a well-rounded person and someone who knows about the world and likes education and knows, different countries from another, and hopefully can speak some different languages. All these things are really important to just being a person. And it really will improve your art. So that's just one thing I wanted to say.
Yeah, man. No, I mean, I definitely feel like there's, yourself, and that, when you come on all of these podcasts or you talk with your friends, you could be there, 5-6 hours one night just talking about life in general or talking about art. There's, I think the only thing that ever feels unfortunate with a lot of these interviews is the fact that, we can't have you guys on for, 2 to 3 hours, because obviously you've got work, you've got things to do. But, I think it's always just great to be able just to peer into your mind, even for an hour, because again, I feel like even I've learned a lot, and that was originally why I started the podcast, because I wanted to just learn from other people and also help other people learn. So I think it's great that we can take the time to listen to your experiences, and hopefully people grow from them. So thank you again for coming on today. It was a real honor to speak to you.
Dude, thanks so much for having me. It was really fun being on. I hope people got something from the conversation, and I really appreciate you having me on. It was an honor.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Finn. So guys, thanks for sticking about to this point. If you've lasted the whole interview, again, just thanks to Finn and to you guys for sticking about. These interviews again will be coming thick and fast, coming up to the next couple of months. Like I said before at the start, we will be reducing the scope of how much we will be producing interview wise, but only because at this point, it's taken a toll on just getting everything organised and having people on. So we'll go back to kind of the normal schedule programming, which is about 1 to 2 episodes a month. So yeah, again, if you're listening, just check out Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts. We're on most services around the world, and of course, if you want, you can check out the YouTube version, which is the main one, where we will be hosting some of Finn's work and other links to his social media and websites, and of course to Terraform and his new studio that's just opened. So yeah, guys, thanks again for sticking about. Thanks again to Finn, and we'll see you guys later. Bye.